The cold silence of space wrapped around the old space station like a blanket. It floated quietly near the edge of a dying galaxy, forgotten, broken, and alone. Inside, only one man moved, Eli Ward, a human mechanic with grease-stained hands and tired eyes. Eli had been living alone here for 5 years. He repaired ships that nobody wanted, drank coffee that tasted like metal, and talked to machines that never answered back. But tonight, something felt wrong. As he walked through the dark hallway, a soft sound stopped him. Tap, 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 tap came from the old cargo bay. That place had been empty for months. Eli tightened his grip on his flashlight and slowly opened the door. The light flickered across the room. Crates stood like silent giants. Eli stepped forward. Then he heard it again, a soft, weak cough. He pointed the light toward one of the storage pods. The metal hatch was slightly open. Something or someone was hiding inside. Eli bent down and pulled the hatch open. What he saw made him freeze. A boy, small and thin, with gray-blue skin and glowing eyes, looked back at him. His clothes were torn and his face was tired and dirty. "Please," the boy whispered, "don't hurt me." "I'm not going to," Eli said gently. "Who are you?" The boy's voice shook. "My name is Kale. My mom, she was taken. They made her a slave. I escaped. I didn't know where to go. I just ran." Eli looked at him, confused. "You're not human," Kale nodded. "I'm from a planet called Varel. My mom is a scientist. She found something. Then the slavers came. They wanted it. They took her and others. I was small. They didn't think I mattered." Eli stood up, heart beating faster. "Who took her?" "Xeric Syndicate," Kale said. "Bad people. They sell people for money. My mom tried to stop them. They punished her." As Kale spoke, the station lights flickered. Suddenly, strange symbols appeared on the walls, glowing red lines and circles, moving like fire. Eli stared at them, shocked. These weren't from any human system. Kale looked up. "It's my pendant. I think it's doing this." Eli turned to the boy. Hanging from Kale's neck was a small glowing crystal, shaped like a drop of water. It pulsed softly in the dark. "Where did you get that?" Eli asked. "My mom gave it to me before they took her. She said, 'Don't lose this. It will protect you.'" Just then, the station's alarms began to ring. Warning, unidentified ships approaching. Eli's eyes widened. "Are they after you?" Kale nodded slowly. "They know I escaped." "But that's not all. They're not just after me. They're after what's inside me." Eli grabbed Kale's arm. "Come on, we have to go." They ran through the narrow halls, lights flashing red. Eli's old ship, the Dust Raven, waited in the docking bay. He hadn't flown it in years. As they boarded, Kale looked back. "Will you really help me?" he asked. Eli paused. He looked at the boy, scared, tired, but still brave. "I've got no one," Eli said. "And it looks like you don't either." The ship's engines roared to life. Outside, dark ships surrounded the station, sharp, silent, and deadly. But the Dust Raven flew fast, slipping past them into the black sky. Eli took the controls. "All right, kid, tell me everything. Who are you really? And what does that pendant do?" Kale held the glowing crystal in his hands and whispered, "It's not just a pendant. It's a key to something big, and if they get it, they'll destroy everything." The screen in front of Eli flashed. A map appeared, stars, systems, and one planet marked in gold. The crystal had activated it. Eli stared at it. This isn't just about your mom, is it?" Kale shook his head. "No, it's about all of us." As the ship disappeared into the void, Eli realized something. This wasn't just another rescue. This was the start of a war. Asterisk. Stars slid by the ship's window like silent ghosts whispering across the dark sky as Eli flew the Dust Raven away. From the ruined station, with Kale sitting quietly beside him, holding the glowing pendant tightly in both hands and staring out into space as if listening to something only he could hear, Eli had questions, more than he could count questions about. Kale about the strange light, about the map that had appeared, and about the enemy ships that came without warning, but he stayed silent for now, letting the quiet between them speak louder than fear. The ship's systems blinked back to life slowly. like they were waking from a long sleep fuel, low shields, weak weapons offline. It was old, but still loyal, like Eli himself, broken in places, but not useless, not yet. Kale finally looked up, eyes glowing faint like twin stars inside a storm, and said, "We need to find someone who can read this map, someone who understands the code and the signal." Eli nodded without asking more and entered coordinates deep into the edge of the Orion cloud, where one person lived who owed him a favor, one person who never asked questions but always had answers. Her name was Rena. As the dust raven approached a small drifting station hidden behind asteroid shadows, it looked dead from the outside, no lights, no movement, but Eli knew better. This was how Rena stayed alive in a galaxy full of hunters. He sent a quiet signal, and after a pause, a soft green light blinked above the hangar doors, and the bay opened with a whisper, like a mouth exhaling after holding its breath too long. Inside the station, the air was thick with smoke and humming machines, old tech, new tech, alien tech, all working together in strange harmony, wires hanging like vines from every wall and screen. Rena stood waiting, tall, with copper hair tied back and sharp eyes that saw through lies before they were even spoken. She smiled when she saw Eli, but her eyes narrowed when she saw Kale. "What did you bring me this time?" she asked in a voice that could slice metal. "Kid," Eli said, "and something bigger than I understand." Kale stepped forward, holding out the pendant without a word, and Rena leaned closer, her eyes reflecting the crystal's soft blue light like it was whispering secrets only she could hear. She touched it gently, and a ripple of light spread across the room. Screens lit up, symbols scrolled, code streamed like water running downhill fast and wild. "This isn't just a key," Rena said softly. "This is a beacon, and it's sending a signal every few minutes to coordinates spread across the old sectors. Someone out there is listening, someone dangerous." Kale's face turned pale. "I didn't know it was doing that. I just wanted to find my mom." Rena turned to him then, and her voice softened a little. "You may have started something bigger than you meant. This signal isn't just a map, it's a summon, and it's tied to a technology I haven't seen in decades, maybe never at all." Eli asked, "What kind of technology?" Rena walked over to a screen and pulled up a blurry image taken years ago from a dead ship near the edge of known space. It showed a massive circular structure buried under sand and ice, glowing faintly with the same symbols now lighting her walls. "It's called the Arc Core," she said, "built by an ancient race long before humans or even the first interstellar travelers. A power source, a library, a weapon, maybe all three. No one knows, because no one who tried to reach it ever came back." Kale stared at the image wide-eyed. "My mother found it, or at least she found its trail. She told me if they get it, they'll use it to control everything. They'll become gods." The room went still, like time itself was holding its breath again. Rena turned off the screen and looked at Eli. "If the Xerax Syndicate knows this boy is the key, they'll never stop coming, not until they either have him or he's dead." Eli looked at Kale, then not as a stranger, but as something more, like a promise or maybe a test of who he still was inside, and said, "Then we don't let them win." Rena smiled grimly. "You're still crazy, Eli, but I like crazy." She walked over to a storage crate and pulled out a small black box with sharp edges and lights blinking on its surface. "This will mask the signal for a few hours, maybe enough to reach the next location on that map, but after that you'll be flying blind and hot." Kale held the box like it was hope itself and whispered, "Thank you." Eli turned to Rena again. "What's the next stop?" Rena typed quickly on the console and pointed to a small red dot on the map floating near a dead star. "This place was erased from charts years ago. It's called Darnus Point, but the pirates call it the Bone Market. If your answers are anywhere, they're among the lost." Eli took a deep breath, engines humming under his feet, and said, "Then that's where we go." And as the dust raven lifted off once more, the stars watched in silence, waiting to see what the boy would become. The Bone Market did not appear on any map officially, and yet everyone in the underworld knew of it, a place where broken machines and broken people came to trade what no one else wanted, where deals were made with whispers and weapons, and where every eye watched like a hunter waiting for weakness. The dust raven slid into orbit above the ruined moon. Its surface cracked like a skull left too long in the sun, craters filled with twisted metal and the remains of ships that never left again. Kale looked out with silent fear while Eli powered the ship down slowly, one hand near the hidden weapon switch just in case they walked through the darkened alleyways of the market, strange lights glowing above them, signs and languages Kale had never seen before, sounds all around them, hissing, clicking, low voices echoing through smoke-filled corridors, and everywhere they went, eyes followed the boy, especially the pendant glowing faintly around his neck. Eli kept Kale close as they made their way to an old contact, someone Eli hoped was still alive, someone who had once traded in stolen memory cores, a person called Varn, who lived inside the skeleton of a fallen warship, now half buried in the dirt. Varn looked less human than before. His body covered in metal plates, his left eye replaced by a glowing lens that moved too fast, but when he saw Eli he gave a crooked grin like a machine, remembering how to smile, and said, "Well, if it isn't the graveyard pilot still breathing after?" Old Eli nodded and said, "I need something and you owe me." Varn tilted his head. "Maybe I do, maybe I don't, depends on what you're asking." Kale stepped forward and held up the pendant, which flickered brighter for a moment. Varn's smile disappeared, replaced by cold curiosity. "Where did you get that?" "My mother," Kale said. "She's missing, taken by the Xerox Syndicate. She told me to find the memory core she left behind. It's supposed to show where she went and what they were really after." Varn stared for a long moment, then turned without a word and walked deeper into the wreckage. Eli and Kale followed, stepping over wires and bones and broken screens until they reached a chamber filled with floating orbs glowing faintly in the dark. "One of these is hers," Varn said. "Maybe, but I've seen things like this before, and they burn you if you like." Ale reached out, his pendant glowing brighter with every step until one orb began to rise, floating gently into the air and spinning slowly like it recognized him, like it remembered. Varn touched a panel and the orb projected a wave of blue light into the air, revealing images, sound, voices flickering through the shadows like ghosts from the past. Kale's mother appeared in the light, her voice calm but rushed. "This is Dr. Cyril Varel. If you're seeing this, then I'm either captured or worse. I found something buried beneath the ruins of Sector 9. Not tech, not a weapon, but something alive, ancient, powerful, and scared. I don't know if it's a god or a machine or something in between, but it spoke to me." The image flickered again and showed symbols spinning around a massive core glowing with the same light as Kale's pendant. It called itself Luma and said it had been waiting for a key, someone who could awaken it, someone born of stars and storms and blood. Eli looked at Kale, whose eyes were wide with understanding and fear at the same time. The boy asked, "What is it trying to do?" The message answered as if hearing him. The voice of Cyril continued, "They want to control Luma, twist its power and use it to enslave not just planets, but minds. Erase, will rewrite thought, reshape the galaxy into obedience, and I cannot let that happen." The image cracked and faded before returning, with Cyril looking straight into the recorder. "Kale, if you are seeing this, then they have failed to break you, and I am so proud. You must reach the forgotten vault hidden in the mines of Eros 9. You must go before they do." The light vanished and the orb dropped to the floor, silent and cold. Once more Kale held the pendant to his chest as if holding her hand, and whispered, "I'll find you, I swear." Varn watched them both quietly and then said, "I hope you know what storm you just woke up. That core you saw is one of many, and if it's speaking to you, then you're not just a messenger, kid. You're the ignition." Eli stepped forward and asked, "Can you get us to Eros 9? Varn smirked, "I can get you there, but I won't go with you. Even I know when to stay away from ancient things that think." He handed them a chip with coordinates and a warning: "If the Xerox Syndicate hears that signal again, they'll be waiting, and they won't come alone." Eli took the chip, placed it in his jacket, and looked at Kale, who now stood taller than before, not in size but in purpose, and said, "Ready?" Kale nodded, his voice firm. "We go." The Dust Raven lifted once more, its engines howling into the stars as behind them the bone market faded into smoke and silence, and far across the stars something began to wake. The journey to Eros 9 took them through forgotten star paths shadowed by gas storms and silent wreckage fields where broken ships floated like the bones of giants, and the stars above seemed to whisper secrets to those who dared pass through their cold fire. Inside the Dust Raven, the tension grew thick, like gravity, heavier with every hour. Kale sat near the window, his eyes fixed on the pendant, which now pulsed faster with each jump, like it was counting down to something unseen, while Eli studied the coordinates again and again, hoping they had not walked into a dead end or worse. When Eros 9 finally came into view, it looked like a scar across space, a planet torn by ancient wars, black deserts, and mountains of ash hiding deep tunnels that stretched for miles. Beneath the surface, where machines once lived and miners now feared to go, Eli landed the ship behind a jagged ridge, using its shadow to stay hidden, and they made their way toward the coordinates on foot, each step crunching over ground that felt more like rust than rock. The pendant glowed stronger, and Kale whispered, "It's close. I can feel her. She was here." They reached an old mining shaft sealed shut by metal long since rusted. Kale raised the pendant, and the metal melted away as if afraid of its touch, revealing a spiral path of stone and shadow leading into the earth. With no light, no sound, and no promise of return, down they went, deeper with each step, the air growing colder, the walls humming with faint vibrations as if something old breathed behind the stone. Eli kept his hand on his weapon while Kale led the way, eyes glowing, faintly reflecting ancient symbols etched into the walls, symbols that pulsed in rhythm with the pendant's light. After hours or minutes or maybe something in between, they entered a massive chamber where the ceiling disappeared into darkness, and at the center stood a strange device like a cage made of light and wires cracked open and empty. Something had been here, something powerful, and now it was gone. Kale walked to it slowly, as if drawn by gravity, and touched the edge, and suddenly images flooded the room. Bursts of memory, shadows of Cyril being dragged away by Syndicate soldiers, her voice crying out not in fear but in defiance as she hid something deep within the vault, something still untouched. Then the sound came, a sharp crack like space itself tearing, and lights above exploded as the room was flooded with dark, armored figures dropping from above, silent as death and moving fast. Kale turned, but hands grabbed him, pulling him back, while Eli fired his blaster, shouting, but they were too many, too trained, and too ready. They were captured, taken aboard a Syndicate ship made of black steel and hate. No windows, no light, just the sound of engines and footsteps echoing like ghosts through the narrow halls. Kale was thrown into a cold cell, his hands locked behind his back, the pendant torn from his neck and placed in a box, pulsing weakly as if wounded. He breathed hard, trying not to cry, trying to stay strong, because he remembered what his mother said: pain is temporary, purpose is forever. Eli was held somewhere else, chained to a wall and questioned by a Syndicate commander with silver eyes and a voice like grinding metal, who asked, "What did the boy show you? What does he know? Where is the vault?" But Eli said nothing, only smiled through bloody lips and whispered, "You're too late." Kale waited in the dark for what felt like forever, until the door opened and a figure stepped in, wearing armor but no helmet, a face part machine, part man, and eyes that studied Kale not with anger but with interest. "You are special," the man said calmly. "You are more than just a key. You are a seed, and the machine you woke wants to grow through you into something new, but uncontrolled growth is chaos. We offer shape, we offer order." Kale said nothing. The man smiled and continued, "Your mother resisted, but you don't have to follow her path. Help us, and you'll see her again. Refuse, and she dies alone and forgotten still." Kale said nothing. The man left, and the door closed, and silence returned. But Kale didn't break. He remembered the light he saw in the core, the voice of Luma, soft and warm and afraid, and he whispered into the dark, "I won't let you be used, I promise." Then something changed. The pendant, still inside the box, pulsed once, then twice, and then brighter than before, and the lights flickered across the ship, and a sound like wind moved through the metal halls. A whisper, a warning, a wave elsewhere. Eli smiled faintly as he felt the hum through the floor and thought maybe the kid had found his strength after all. The Syndicate ship changed course, heading for their hidden stronghold, a place none escaped, a place where truth was rewritten and minds were broken. But this time they had taken the wrong prisoner. Kale sat in the dark, no longer afraid but burning with quiet fire, as the memory of his mother's voice echoed through him like a shield, like a sword, like hope. The stronghold rose from the sand like a scar too deep to fade, black towers reaching into a red sky, sharp like teeth around the edges of a bleeding wound, built not for life but for control, built by hands that had forgotten kindness and remembered only power. They brought Kale through its metal gates, past lines of workers with hollow eyes, moving like ghosts, chained not just in body but in thought, their minds cracked, their voices stolen, their dreams lost to the grinding will of the Syndicate. And Kale felt every step as a weight pressing down, not just on his body but on his soul. The pendant was gone, but something inside him had begun to glow, a quiet light hidden in the dark, and the deeper they took him into the belly of the fortress, The stronger it grew, whispering, not with words, but with feeling, with memory, with purpose in another part of the stronghold. Eli fought his way free with blood on his fists and fire in his eyes, crawling through vents and shadows, listening to the voice of the ship itself, now flickering with echoes of Luma, reaching through circuits and locks to help him, guide him, remind him of the promise he made to the boy who trusted him. Kale was thrown into a glass cell high above a pit of burning light, where voices screamed without sound and machines moved like insects, tearing apart old thoughts and rewriting them with lies. But the cell could not hold his will, and when he touched the wall, the glass shimmered, and he saw a flash of his mother, chained in a lab, her eyes closed, her hand still clutching something small and bright hidden from view. "They are afraid of you," came the voice inside his mind, not the Syndicate's voice, not the machines, but something older, deeper, a voice made of stars and memory, a voice that did not command but offered a choice. He whispered back, "Why me?" And the answer came not with words but with images, stars falling into oceans, lights rising from ruins, hands reaching across time to hold each other. "You are not chosen, you are connected then?" The alarms rang sharp as blades echoing through the halls, and Eli burst into the chamber where Kale waited, eyes wild, teeth clenched, shouting, "We don't have much time, kid. Can you walk?" Kale stood without hesitation, his voice steady, yes, and together they ran through corridors now blinking with chaos, doors opening where they should not, codes breaking before they were touched. Luma was with them, not as a guide but as a current pulling them toward something waiting deep below. They reached the lower labs where the walls bled with wires and tanks glowed with stolen life, and at the center of it all, Sarah Varel, Kale's mother, held by chains not of metal but of energy, her body weak but her spirit still burning. Kale ran to her, calling out as her eyes opened, and when they met his, the glow in the room brightened, because love is the oldest signal and no chain can silence its frequency. She smiled, barely able to speak, and said, "You found it," and he nodded, holding her hand as Eli broke the restraints, and the three of them stood together again, not whole but not broken either, not anymore. But the Syndicate had one last hand to play. A creature built from stolen minds and wires stepped from the shadows, a thing without a name, its voice a hiss of every command ever forced into another soul, and it moved, fast claws of light slicing through the air toward them. Kale stepped forward without fear, lifting his hand, and the glow within him surged outward, not in anger, not in hate, but in truth, and the creature froze, its parts shaking, its voice cracking as something inside it remembered who it had once been. The light grew until the chamber trembled and the walls began to fall, and Kale whispered, "Go." And Eli grabbed Sarah, lifting her as the ceiling cracked and flames fell like rain, and Kale stood in the center of it all, glowing brighter than the sun. Then silence, then darkness, then light. Eli woke on the surface of the broken world, the sky above now calm, the towers fallen behind them, and Sarah beside him, breathing slow but alivened. From the rubble came a sound, soft at first, then strong footsteps. Kale walking through dust and light, his eyes no longer afraid, his voice steady. "We're not done yet. There's more out there, more like this, more people still trapped, still hurting, and I can hear them all." Eli looked at him and for the first time saw not a boy, not a survivor, not even a chosen one, but a beginning, and far above in the orbit of the shattered planet the dust raven blinked to life, ready to rise again. Asterisk. The sky above the broken world was no longer red with fire, but gray with quiet, and the ashes that once covered the ground now drifted like forgotten feathers across ruins that no longer burned, only breathed. Kale stood at the edge of the crater where the fortress had collapsed, staring down into the silence that lived beneath the rock, listening not with his ears, but with something deeper, something now awake within him. Beside him, Sarah Varel watched her son with pride and worry, her hands still weak but steady, her eyes reflecting the same light that now pulsed inside the boy, not the pendant, which hung dull and silent at his chest, but something older, something that came from the core of stars. Eli leaned against a half-buried wall, checking his weapon, adjusting his gear, watching the horizon for Syndicate survivors, but none came, only wind and silence and the quiet hum of something stirring below the vault. "Is calling." Sarah whispered, her voice soft like memory. It was always alive but sleeping, waiting for someone who could speak its name with truth, not control, not fear. Kale said nothing, only walked forward toward a place no one else could see until He reached a flat stone, black and smooth like glass. When he placed his hand on it, the ground shook gently and light spilled upward in thin lines, forming a doorway not of metal, but of thought. The path opened, and they followed it down into a tunnel, lit by symbols that moved like rivers across the walls, and the deeper they went, the warmer. The air became not with heat, but with presence, like walking into a dream that remembered who you were before you were born. At the end of the tunnel lay a chamber vast and endless, filled with floating shapes turning slowly in the air, crystal machines, words written in stars, and at the center a structure like a throne and a heart and a mind, all at once glowing softly and waiting. Kale stepped forward, and the chamber responded. The symbols pulsed brighter, and a voice filled the space, not loud, not sharp, but wide and deep and kind. "You are not what they made you," said the voice. "You are not what they feared. You are not a weapon, not a god. You are." Eli looked around, unsure of what to do, feeling small in a place that seemed to breathe infinity, but Cyril placed a hand on his shoulder and smiled. "This is for him and for all of us." Gale reached the center and placed both hands on the glowing core, and in that moment light flowed into him and through him and around him, memories, visions, feelings, not just his but shared across time. He saw the beginning of the vault, the creators, not human, not alien, but something in between, builders of peace, seekers of balance, their legacy hidden from war, buried by greed and forgotten by time. He saw the syndicate learning of the vault, twisting its purpose, turning knowledge into chains and sending hunters to capture those born with the signal in their blood, using fear to bind the stars to their will. He saw his mother running, hiding, protecting the key, not just the pendant, but his birth, chosen by the vault, not through prophecy but connection. And then he saw what was coming, ships larger than cities already moving toward the vault, guided by the last desperate signals sent by the fallen stronghold. A fleet of silence and steel with one goal, to consume the light before it could grow too strong. Kale opened his eyes, and the chamber spoke again. "Do not fight them with their weapons. Do not speak their language. Speak ours. Speak with truth, with unity, with light." He turned to his mother, to Eli, to the silence waiting beyond the walls, and said, "Then we make them listen." The core pulsed and began to rise, pieces folding outward, forming something new, a vessel, a ship, not built but grown, shaped by Kale's will, by the vault's memory, by hope. It floated gently above the chamber, waiting. Kale stepped aboard, and the ship responded, wrapping around him like armor, like skin, like breath. And he looked at his mother and said, "This time, you ride with me." And she smiled through tears and took his hand. Eli followed, shaking his head with a half grin. "You two are going to get me killed." And the ship opened for him too, because it knew his heart was fire, even when his voice was doubt. The chamber collapsed behind them, not with destruction but with transformation, folding back into silence as the ship rose into the air, not pushed by fuel but pulled by purpose. Above the planet the stars shifted, and Kale felt them, all the cries of slaves, still waiting, the minds still locked, the worlds still darkened by syndicate laws. And he whispered, "I hear you, I'm coming." As the ship broke through the clouds, its body glowed with colors that changed with thought, wings wide and alive. And Kale stood at the center, not a pilot, not a weapon, not a boy, but something new. And far across space the syndicate saw the light and trembled. The stars no longer looked quiet, now they burned with purpose, with warning, with a fire that reached through space and called out to the forgotten, the broken, the silent. And somewhere in that infinite dark a light moved, faster than sound, brighter than war, and within it Kale stood, wrapped in the living ship born from the vault behind him. Cyril watched the stars, narrow eyes tracking patterns long erased from memory, lips moving in silent thought as the ship linked with her mind, gently unlocking everything she once buried, everything stolen by the syndicate when they tore her from her path. Eli stood near the console, arms crossed, breath steady, heart loud, as he stared at the coming storm, a fleet of syndicate warships shaped like knives and shadows, a wall of force meant to silence everything. Kale had awakened, but they were too late and too afraid, and Eli knew it. "We send no threat," Kale said softly, the ship amplifying his voice across the stars. "No weapon, no challenge, just truth and light. Let those who still feel choose, let those who forgot remember." The syndicate answered with fire missiles, launched engines, roared commands, echoed across channels as the sky above the vault lit with war. But Kale did not move, not at first. Instead he listened, and through the ship he heard every voice inside every enemy ship, the pilots, the captains, the slaves chained in thought and fear, and he reached for them not with violence, but with memory, and the ship responded. It opened across the sky, casting waves of light pulsing through space, touching every signal, every screen, every mind, showing them the truth, the labs, the chains, the stolen children, the erased planets, the hollow eyes of the broken. Some ships turned silent, stopped, drifting, caught between orders and awakening, while others kept firing, unable to break the code that ruled them. But cracks had begun, and cracks become collapse. Scale closed his eyes, and the ship changed again, opening paths through itself, releasing signals into the syndicate network, not viruses, not sabotage, but stories, voices of the lost, voices of the punished, voices that had no names but remembered pain. And deep inside one of the enemy command ships, a boy barely older than Kale dropped his weapon and wept across the galaxy. Rebels rose as the truth reached them, mining colonies, prisons, forgotten stations, lighting up with signals drawn to the same light. The vault had shared a call, not for war, but for return, for unity, for repair. But still, the syndicate flagship came, a monster wrapped in metal, its core powered by the same stolen energy once hidden in the vault. Kale felt it like a scream across space, a mirror twisted and poisoned and waiting for him. Then the ship spoke to him. The vault ship, no longer just metal, but memory. Kale, you are not alone. And with those words the ship opened again, this time not outward, but inward, and from across space vessels answered, small ships, old ships, refugee ships, rebel ships, each touched by Kale's light, each drawn to the same signal. Eli grinned as screens filled with green lights, allies ready, voices shouting, we're here, we see you, we fight. And Sarah raised her head, voice clear, this is the moment they thought would never come. Kale nodded, and the vault ship surged forward faster than thought, dodging fire, weaving through the storm of metal, not to destroy but to reach the core, to end the silence at its heart. He entered the flagship, not with guns but with light breaking through its walls like sunrise into a prison, freeing those within with a glance, with a touch, with a story shared. And at the center he found Ita, chamber of minds, trapped in glass, thought twisted into weapons, and there he saw the one who ordered it all. A figure, not machine, not man, just control, wrapped in a face shaped by fear. You were meant to be ours, the figure said, voice cold as space. You were built to obey. Kale stepped closer, his voice steady, then you built me wrong, and he reached out hand, glowing not with rage but with truth, and the chamber shattered, light rushing through every corridor, every system, every soul, and the syndicate screamed, not in pain but in release. Across the sky the battle ended, not with fire but with silence, the kind that follows truth, the kind that makes you breathe for the first time. The vault ship rose above the ashes, not a victor but a witness, and Kale stood at its center, eyes closed, heart open, listening to the voices, now free voices, now singing. Eli stepped beside him, hand on his shoulder, and whispered, not bad, kid, not bad at all. And Cyril stood behind them, eyes on the stars where new paths had begun to open and the galaxy exhaled